What's up, Rangers faithful? This is the Rink podcast right here on Forever Blueshirts. I am Jim Cerny. Thanks for coming to hang out. This is where it all happens with the Rangers. Break it all down, and man, there's so much going on, and I know you guys are fired up. Most of you are pretty happy today after the start of free agency on July 1 and Chris Drury's big day, really taking care of a lot of business in a lot of different ways. I know most of you are really happy. I know some of you are still pissed off that there's somebody that's killing me on social media about how the Rangers really blew it because they spent $1.5 million a year over the next 2 years on Taylor Radish. Like, this is going to be the undoing of the New York Rangers. Forget everything else, the good, the bad. It comes down to the fact that they gave $1.5 million to Taylor Radish. So, yeah, we've got the guy also telling me that this is the centennial year. The Rangers have to win the Stanley Cup, to the guy who thinks that, yeah, Taylor Radish being signed is going to squash any Stanley Cup hopes for the New York Rangers. So we got that. We got everything in between. Love your passion. Love your passion. That's what fuels this Rink Rap podcast. Please like and subscribe to the podcast. It's a big help. We love your support, and also your support on social media at Jim Cerny, at Forever Blueshirts, and also heading to the website, of course, foreverblueshirts.com, where certainly I've been firing off story after story, analysis after analysis, because this is the busiest time of the off season. We went through the drafts, which was certainly, an important stretch for the Rangers. 8 picks, none of them on day one, but you know what? That's okay. 8 picks, kind of restocked the prospect pool. And then we got into what happened on July 1st. And why don't we start from, that point, and we'll kind of work backwards to the draft. So everything this offseason clearly for the New York Rangers centered around signing Vladislav Gavrikov. Okay. And clearly they knew. I know tampering and this, that, and the other thing. There's no tampering. Rangers never talked to Gavrikov's representation or whatever. Okay, whatever. Somehow the Rangers knew that Gavrikov, that there was the mutual interest there. But you could also see it, even as a casual observer. You could see that Gavrikov was kind of holding the Los Angeles Kings at arm's length. Kenny Holland, their new GM, really wanted to get Gavrikov signed. You saw it in all the interviews, through the draft weekend and heading into free agency. Holland was trying to, we've got another offer. We're going to meet again. We're going to talk again. And there's no doubt Gavrikov was holding them off at arm's length. He wanted the New York Rangers, but the Rangers' offseason plan was centered around landing Vladislav Gavrikov. I do not know if they knew that they'd be able to get him at $7 million a year. I think we all thought, especially when you saw Ivan Provorov re-up with Columbus for $8.5 million a year on a max deal. You kind of, you winced a little bit and said, wait a minute here, Gavrikov's the better defenseman, right? Yeah, I've been writing that for how many months? When I listed the free agent defenseman, Gavrikov was the guy I thought was the best available option, especially on the left side. You could make your Aaron Ekblad, I guess, argument on the right side, but hey, he never made it to free agency either because he re-upped with the Panthers. But, if it was Gavrikov or Provorov, like, to me, Gavrikov's the better player. I mean, they're both solid top 4 left shot defensemen. But Gavrikov was more my guy. You all know that. I've talked about it here in the podcast. Yeah, I've written about it multiple times, at Forever Blueshirts. But boy, you had to think, right? When you saw Provorov re-up for $8.5 million a year, where you go, uh-oh, is this going to submarine Chris Drury's, master plan? Because there's no doubt that this was the first domino that needed to fall. Okay? They needed to bring in Gavrikov. They needed to sign him, needed to know that they had him under contract really before they traded Keiondre Miller. Because just on the off chance that they had traded Keiondre Miller a week ago, let's say, he's off the roster. Your top left shot D at that point was, Carson Soucy? Okay. You maybe Braden Schneider if you move him from right side to left side. But woo, you're running the risk there. That really would have been flirting with disaster. Because what if Gavrikov then re-upped with LA and Provorov re-upped with Columbus? I mean, what were your options? Then in free agency, Brian Dumoulin? I don't think so. Anyway, it didn't happen that way. But the Rangers certainly were in a better position to make that Keiondre Miller trade once they had Gavrikov under contract. Again, 7 years, $49 million. It's a big investment for a guy that's 29 years old. So he's going to be 36, heading towards 37 at the end of this deal. But that said, right now, you certainly can make that argument that Gavrikov is the steadier, more reliable, shutdown defensive defenseman, a guy to pair with Adam Fox, right? I mean, I know the Kings are a much better overall defensive team than the New York Rangers. They get much more buy-in and commitment from their forwards, and it's a different style. And that helps Gavrikov's underlying metrics. He's a good defenseman, okay? Physical, big, as I said, steady and reliable, uses his stick well, makes good decisions, gets the puck out of there as well. So that was the Rangers' plan, right? It's all centered around Gavrikov. Then the Miller trade happens. And to me, what a fascinating trade this is going to be. Not just now, to dissect now, because, I see so many people proclaiming, the Rangers are the winners of this trade, right? And listen, their haul, I didn't expect them to get, a first rounder, a second rounder, and a top prospect defenseman in return as well. I didn't think they were going to get that for Miller. I knew Miller had appeal around the league, but boy, I didn't expect that return. But circling back, the Rangers no longer believed in this player, one, but I still believe they would have brought him back if Gavrikov was not available. They couldn't have afforded to let Miller go. However, financially, especially with the salary cap where they stood, they couldn't afford to keep Miller once they had Gavrikov, once they signed Gavrikov. So Keiondre gets traded. I think a really nice haul for the Rangers. I know we were all surprised. I don't think anybody, from the NHL insiders to reporters like me to fans like you, I don't think anybody really expected that kind of return for Keiondre Miller. Then Carolina doubled down on it with that massive contract, $7.5 million, a year for 8 years, a $60 million package for a guy that the Rangers were so reluctant to go long-term or big money with. So, listen, right? Eye of the beholder. Rangers had close-up view of Keiondre Miller for years, and this was their assessment. If that's our last option, okay, we'll keep him. We'll figure something out. Sign him 2-3 year deal, whatever. That was the feeling that you had. But our preference is let's move on from this guy. We don't think he's worth the long-term investment. Too inconsistent, crazy upside, but is he ever going to reach that? Was 2 years ago the best we're ever going to see from Keiondre Miller? That seemed to be where Chris Drury was at. Carolina on the flip side, and this is where it takes a long time to dissect a trade, because right now, again, like I said, a lot of people, hockey experts, hockey insiders, thinking, wow, it's a great trade for the Rangers. Well, here's the thing. The Carolina Hurricanes are super confident that in their system, playing on the second defense pair, playing behind Jacob Slavin, playing their, up-tempo style, which they do so effectively under Rod Brind'Amour, that Keiondre Miller is going to be not only a good top four defenseman, he's going to be a star. That's clearly what they're banking on by giving away, 3 key assets and signing Miller to a $60 million contract. Like, their faith in Rod Brind'Amour and in their system and in their locker room with their players, their leaders, and how they develop their prospects. And I know Miller is, a young veteran right now at this stage of his career. He's not a prospect, but how they bring along their players into their style and do it so successfully, even with some rapid turnover over the years. They believe in the player here. They believe in what Keiondre Miller can be. The Rangers did not. And I'm not so sure either. But if there's one organization that might be able to really draw out the best in him and have the best, put him in the best situation, right? He's not going to play on the top pair. I'm not saying he can't. I can't say, I don't think that it's impossible that he can't be a top pair defenseman in the NHL, a real effective one. He would have been this year if he was the Rangers guy. I do believe he would have been Adam Fox's partner. But to have him play behind Jacob Slavin, that's pretty good, right? That's pretty good for that team. It's a good spot for Keiondre Miller. So I wrote in my analysis story last night that you can, of course, see on foreverblueshirts.com, that right now, this second, for me, this is a win-win. I think both teams win right now. As of today, as of July 2nd, both teams win. And I think the player wins. Players win. Because I think this is what Gavrikov wanted. I think he's fired up to come to New York, come to Broadway, be a Ranger. It's clearly what he wanted. He left money on the table to come here. So a win for him. I think it's a win for Miller. He gets out from New York, kind of the last two seasons, a lot of negativity around him, around the team. Clear that the general manager didn't believe in him anymore. So, he gets a fresh opportunity with a really good organization, with a really good head coach, with a system and structure that should really benefit him. So it's a win for Gavrikov. It's a win for Miller. It's a win for the Rangers. Conditional first-round pick and a second-round pick in a loaded 2026 draft. And you get prospect Scott Morrow, one of Carolina's top prospects, right? And what you do here, too, is you turn back the clock a little bit. And he and Keiondre Miller are different defensemen, above and beyond the fact that one's a left shot, one's a right shot. Like Morrow is much more of an offensive defenseman, okay? And he has struggled in his growth as a defenseman, playing in his own end. He has struggled in that aspect, and it's taken him a while in his development to get better. He finally cracked the NHL a little bit last year. He was thrust into 5 postseason games because of injuries on Carolina's blue line. That was not pretty. He was probably not ready for that moment. And listen, the rest of his team kind of got exposed there too by the Panthers, but he had a tough go of it in the playoffs. But listen, he's a young kid. He's 22. So you're getting a defenseman, and this is why I talk about turning back the clock a little bit here. He's 3 years younger than Keiondre Miller, and he's going to make a lot less money against the salary cap. That's a win for the New York Rangers. So Gavrikov replaces Miller in the lineup. You also add Morrow possibly to the lineup, if not right at the start of the year. At some point, they're counting on him to be one of their top 6. If not, early October, then sometime soon, right? So now you've incorporated 2 new defensemen in there. And one of the guys that replaces Miller, again, younger, less expensive. Let's see. Let us work with him now. And again, gives a different look to the Rangers defense, gives them a really, really good second offensive option on the back end, obviously behind Adam Fox. And they needed this because they let Zach Jones go. Now, listen, it's clear where the Rangers stood on Zach Jones, from David Quinn to Gerard Gallant to Peter Laviolette. None of those coaches trusted Zach Jones to be an everyday defenseman, an every game defenseman, right? Despite the offensive gifts that he had. So, he didn't get his qualifying offer. He's shown the door. He signed a 1-year, 2-way contract. I know I'm jumping off on tangents here. 1-year, 2-way contract with the Buffalo Sabres, who are loaded down the left side. He's stuck in almost the same situation he was the past 5 years with the New York Rangers, right? He could be on the AHL, Express, and I was surprised that's where he ended up. And again, the Sabres are loaded on the left side, with guys that are signed for multiple years, including your captain and one of your alternate captains, 2 first-round picks, Power and Dahlin. Yeah. So unless they're going to move one of those guys to the right side or move Zach Jones to the right side, as they did with Bowen Byram last year, I don't know. It seems to be almost an identical situation, for Zach Jones. In any case, we digress. So Zach Jones, gets moved from the equation for the Rangers, but now Morrow steps in as that second really good offensive option on the back end. And to be honest, probably a better option. He's a right shot. He's bigger, right? Clearly the Rangers were not comfortable with the fact about Zach Jones's size. So, Morrow's a bigger guy, pretty prolific in the minor leagues last year, good background. And listen, it's one of Carolina's top prospects, if not the top prospect in the Hurricanes organization. So, anyway, so Scott Morrow's here. One of the things that I also like about his addition, let's assume they go through training camp and they think he's good to go as a top 6 guy, for opening night. What this does is clear the path. And I think this is really, really like an underlying thing that is part of the magic of this trade, if you will, is that it gives the Rangers the opportunity to move Braden Schneider out of the third pair from the right side, his natural side, and move him up into a top 4 spot finally, but do it on the left side, his offside. He proved last year, and I know he didn't do it for half a season or the entire season, but when given the opportunity early on in the season because of injuries to play the left side, Braden Schneider, he proved to you he can play the left side. Okay. So he, especially now that the shoulder is healed, he had the surgery, he's been playing with the torn labrum for a couple of years. You put him and Will Borgen together there, as a defense pair, your second defense pair that can, you can line them up against whichever line you want them to match up with. That's a nice physical pair. Getting Morrow allows you to do that because you can bring Morrow along as a third liner on the right side, basically taking Schneider's spot there. And then he pairs with a veteran either way, whether it's Carson Soucy or whether it's Urho Vakanainen, he's got a veteran guy on the left side that he can lean on the third pair. And I don't know about you. I like either Vakanainen or Soucy in a third pair role, as opposed to having one of them be the second pair defenseman with Borgen. Like, I know Soucy, I'm sure, especially at $3.5 million a year, probably envisions himself more as that second pair guy. But I think you're better served, Schneider, Borgen, and then Vakanainen and or Soucy along with Morrow. So I think that's an underlying part of this trade. Again, right now the Rangers can say that this is a win for us. You move on from a player you didn't want. You get quite a haul in return. And again, if you're Carolina, if you really, and they do, you've heard what Rob Brindamore has said, what Eric Tulsky, the GM, has said, and they put their money where their mouth is. They believe in Keiondre Miller. They said that our scouts search for players that will fit with our style, with our structure, how we play the game. We think Keiondre Miller is a perfect fit. So for them right now, it's a win too. But what I love about this, what makes this trade so fascinating, right, is that it's within the division, right? Who makes this big a trade within the division? It almost never happens. Certainly with Chris Drury, it doesn't happen. He is so cautious, and all the rumors before Miller was traded was that they were talking to teams in the Western Conference. We did hear some Detroit Red Wings rumors as well, but at least that was out of the Metropolitan Division. No, Carolina, man, this is a team that you've played twice in the past 4 years in the playoffs. This is a team that you battle for, playoff positioning with. Oh, hell, this is going to be great, right? It just adds to the stakes of this trade. And at the end of the day, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 7 years down the road, whenever we really size up and we can look back and say, well, winner or loser, it's possible both teams come out of this looking good, right? Both teams can win here. Or you can have if Keiondre Miller's skating around the rink like Nico Mikkola with the Stanley Cup, that's probably not good for Chris Drury at the New York Rangers. Or the flip side, if the Rangers win a cup or they continually finish ahead of Carolina or knock Carolina out in the playoffs like they did in, 22 and 24, then they're the clear winners. But, this has a chance to be one of those that really works out for each side. And listen, let's have at it. I love that he's going to be in the division, and I love that, guys are going to be going head to head and everything. In reading your social media input, since the trade, I'd say it's overwhelming, how people feel about this. Everybody seems psyched that Gavrikov is here. They felt it was time for Miller to move on. Some people more vocal about it than others, but for the most part, people agreed. It's time to move on. So Ranger fans right now are happy. I think Hurricanes fans are happy, and let the chips fall where they may. We'll really start to dive into this once training camp starts and we get a better look at Scott Morrow and go from there. One of the other pieces of big news for the Rangers on July 1 was they got Will Cooley under contract, right? RFA, a lot of stories and rumors about if somebody can offer sheet him. The Rangers only have X amount of money under the salary cap. Well, he came in at a little bit higher figure than the Rangers normally give out on a second contract, your first contract after your entry level one. Historically, the Rangers don't go as high as $3.9 million AAV as they did with Cooley. But I think he's, he's a special kid. And there's no doubt, Chris Drury wants this team to be a more straight ahead, north-south, physical, team, players that show up every game, play the 200-foot game. I mean, admit the disaster that it was last year. Night in and night out, Will Cooley was exemplary in his effort. He went through stretches, where he wasn't scoring goals and he struggled or whatever, with production, but never with effort with that guy. And, those 301 hits, Rangers record tied for third in the league last year, that's not just a random number. That speaks to who this kid is. And it's not just, hits. I mean, he can be a game-altering, shift-altering guy just with his physical play. And, he can finish. 20 goals last year in his second full NHL season, 45 points. And that's with not always being in the top six. I mean, he started, on the third line, and kind of bounced around throughout the year. If he gets consistent top 6 minutes, and his minutes did jump by 4 minutes a game from his rookie season last year, and he plays on the power play, whether it's, first or second unit, likely second unit. And he continues to be a presence on the penalty kill. I mean, he's solid defensively, plays a 200-foot game. Like these are the guys you want to build around. And it was vital that the Rangers got this done before any offer sheet nonsense or before, the rumors could even build up, that there was any distraction. And the Rangers got it done. And, it helped a little bit that Gavrikov probably took a little less money, but they were still going to find a way to get it done. And you had the sense all along too that sure, Will Cooley is not going to sneeze at if somebody came at him with a massive offer sheet offer. Listen, he'd have to look out for himself for sure. But I think underlined with all this is Will Cooley wants to be a New York Ranger. I think he wants to be a part of this next wave, that a core as a leader, as a successful player with this organization. So again, talk about win-wins. It's a win for Will Cooley. That is a nice, basically $3 million a year raise, that he got over the next 2 years off his entry-level contract. And for the Rangers, you tie up a guy that absolutely needs to be an important part of your core, because the arrow's pointing up with him. And he's the type guy that you want on this team, on this roster, in this organization for all the right reasons. So good on him. So I think he needs to be in the top 6. Now, here's a thought about the lineup structure right now, because things are a little bit falling into place. Cooley's now signed. In fact, all their RFAs are signed, and of course Miller was traded. So that those pieces of business are in place. Rempe signed, Edstrom signed, Parssinen signed. Now Cooley signed. So it's coming into focus of what the top 12 forwards, or top 13 if you count your extra, what it's looking like. The key question here, how it all shapes up, will be the decision on Mika Zibanejad, not whether or not he's going to be here or not. He's going to be here, okay? The question will be, does Mike Sullivan see him as a center, or does Mike Sullivan see Zibanejad as a right wing? Now, we know last year he played his best hockey playing right wing on the line with JT Miller. Miller did the dirty stuff. Can you imagine if they had Cooley and Miller on the same line with Zibanejad? Listen, as much as we all get on Zibanejad for, his, laissez-faire approach sometimes to the all-around game, if he's on that line, he doesn't need to do much dirty work if Miller and Cooley are his line mates, right? And that's what we found out when he played with JT last year. But, if you look at lineup construction, there is a big advantage to having Zibanejad stay in the middle too. And of course, that is that I believe Vincent Trocheck then could slide down to be your 3C, because right now you do not have an automatic 3C on this roster. So, Taylor Radish is signed. I know he's played some center, but he's a wing. But, you have Parssinen, who the Rangers seem to really like. I'm not quite sold on him. I'm not sure for the identity of what I'd like to see my third line to be. I'm not sure Parssinen's the guy I want. You also have Johnny Brodzinski. He's an option to be your third line center. I still believe as good as he is and what a spark plug he is, what a, kind of a leader he is, especially for the younger guys that, he played with in Hartford in the past. I still see Johnny Brodzinski as your 13th guy. And when you need him on the wing or you need him at center, he mixes in with no problem. I'm not sure that he's your every day, every game 3C. So I'm not sure that 3C is there unless it's Vincent Trocheck. That's the role that they signed him to play several years ago, along with the power play and the penalty kill being a key guy in those areas. And it really all changed, in his first season, but certainly his second season here in New York. That's when they were committing to Filip Chytil in the top 6, and Trocheck started the season on that third line. That's the way they were going to go with things. But then Chytil, of course, had the concussion 10 games into the season, missed the rest of the season, opened the door for Trocheck. And of course, that was the magical season with him and Panarin and Lafreniere. So I get the argument to keep that threesome together in the top 6. But if you spread it out, and if you look at it now and say, really don't have that center for the third line, you know? Boy, Trocheck would be a hell of a fit there. So Trocheck, then, let them jockey for whoever gets that, the spots on the wing. Brennan Othman, Brett Berard, Radish, Brodzinski. Let them kind of jockey and figure it out. Perot, maybe Perot or Othman, they get a look then in the top six. If Mika is not playing on the wing, that opens up a spot on the wing. Maybe that gives one of the kids a chance, higher up. But the key there might be the decision that Mike Sullivan makes with Mika Zibanejad. Is he a top six center? A center in your top six forward group? Or is he a right wing on a line with Trocheck in the top six? Because then that changes your whole equation, and I think throws the balance off. I could argue it either way, but you can tell I'm leaning towards liking having Trocheck center that third line. So we'll see. Could be more moves as well coming. I don't think so. Bigger picture, like if you really want to open things up, especially because, I know it's prospects development camp this week. And I saw Noah Laba was speaking with the reporters the other day. That's a guy to keep an eye on. I don't know that, he'd be ready to really contend for a spot on the opening night roster, but he's an intriguing guy because he is solid two-way. He's a 200-foot player, wins faceoffs, penalty kill guy. And he'd be a hard-nosed guy, in north-south player, and he's got some offensive skill as well. I know he's just left college last year, 3 years at Colorado College. You probably want him to develop more at Hartford. I'm all for that. But I'm thinking bigger picture down the road. When you look through the organizational depth chart, Noah Laba might be that 3C down the road. And boy, that'd be great. Again, more homegrown players on entry-level contracts, that you have control over, that can play in your lineup effectively. I'm not saying load the entire lineup that way. Like, again, I digress, but somebody was all over me on social media because I said, yeah, if Gabe Perreault looks like he's ready to play in training camp, don't hold him back. Put him on the opening night roster. If he earns it, he's got to earn it. Some guys, he's killing me. He's like, physically, he's not ready. He's this, that, and the other thing. He needs seasoning in Hartford. I'm not against letting the prospects season in Hartford. You don't think that Brendan Othman and Brett Berard, for example, didn't gain so much from their experience down there? Of course they did. And of course Perreault would. And of course Noah Laba will, assuming he goes down. And the other kids as well. Matt Rempe did. Rempe went back last season for a couple months. Did him wonders. Did wonders for his development as a hockey player to go down to the AHL. So I get it. You don't need to force guys onto the roster. And that's what I was accused of. Oh, you're just trying to force the kid on the roster. It's all about the kids. What team full of kids ever raises the Stanley Cup? I'm paraphrasing what the guy said. I get it. But in the bigger picture, the more of these kids that can actually contribute to the success of the team at the NHL level, it is a good thing. That's what winning teams do. You don't totally rely on free agency and the big money guys. You develop them yourself. And of course, that's been the big bugaboo. We could go back to Keiondre Miller, development. Did they develop him well enough? Did they coach him up well enough? Is that the missing link here? Capo Caco. And Filippino's really more of an injury issue, but all these guys that they've moved on from, You can get on the Rangers about their drafting. You can get on them about their development. It's all fair. It's all there. But anyway, so just some thoughts there about the lineup, where they could be headed, where the kids might fit in come September. And real quick thought, again, it's prospects camp. The draft was last weekend as well. Rangers, made the decision. I think we all agree, the smart decision, to they gave the Penguins their number 12 overall pick in the first round. That completed the JT Miller trade. The Rangers keep their first round pick in 2026. So now they have 2 first rounders in 2026. I think it was a good move. It was the right thing to do. It was kind of funny, I might say, to see the Penguins and the Flyers then exchange that number 12 pick that the Rangers gave to the Penguins or sent to the Penguins, because the Penguins and Flyers never make a trade, right? We talk about the Rangers and Hurricanes. What? Making a trade for Keiondre Miller. What about those teams there? I know NHL players weren't involved. It was just trading positions in the first round to select, trading picks. But kind of ironic that's where that number 12 pick ended up kind of bouncing around the Metropolitan Division before the Flyers finally landed it. But that's it. So the Rangers made 8 picks in the second round. And we're not going to break them all down. Again, I've got my breakdown over at Forever Blueshirts. And I know many of you have read it already. But just a quick thought on Malcolm Spence, who unfortunately was unable to get on the ice at development camp this week. He had an illness. I believe he's present, but I know he wasn't on ice at the development camp, which is a shame. But heading to University of Michigan, really good program. Everyone that I've reached out to in college hockey, in the scouting world, people who certainly know that are more draft gurus than I am, for sure, right? People that just know more about the prospects. I haven't found one that doesn't believe Malcolm Spence was a really good pick for the New York Rangers. Now, by really good pick, we're talking, great value, number 43 overall. He ended up going in the second round. Most of those people, kind of threw in the sidebar that, hey, listen, we're not talking about, the guy's not going to be a superstar, but this is a guy that should be in the league for a decade once he gets here and be a reliable middle sixer that'll be physical, will put up points, that will be committed to playing a 200-foot game, which we've talked a lot about. The type player that Chris Drury absolutely has been hunting for. Supposedly, that's Malcolm Spence. That's what the experts say Malcolm Spence is. And there are reasons why his stock fell and why he fell out of the first round. Many thought he was going to be a first-round pick. Inconsistencies in his game, lapses in his game. But apparently he's a great kid, a leader, like one of those natural-born leaders. I know he wore an A in Erie last season. Cool story that the guy who wore the C was Carey Terrence, who the Rangers got in the Chris Kreider trade. And now those two are reunited in the Rangers organization, at development camp together. And Carey Terrence will go down. And he, if he and Noah Laba are there at Hartford this year, assuming that should be the case, they could be the number 1 and number 2 centering the top 2 lines, getting, 18, 19, 20 minutes a night apiece. I mean, that is dream scenario for an organization that really was thin at the center position after what they have in the NHL, including Zibanejad in that mix, and a guy we never even mentioned who anchors the fourth line in Sam Carrick. Carey Terrence is a guy I'm excited, to see more about. Again, a high character player, two-way player, maybe not a star producer offensively, but Spence is like that as well. The experts tend to think that he's going to score. He's going to be a guy that you want in your lineup. But he's going to be a guy that helps you win in many, many different ways. So I think it's pretty cool that the Rangers landed that type of player and that he fell to them. And, you heard it. So many experts saying that he was he was the steal of the draft, or at least of the first couple rounds. Rangers drafted 5 defensemen. John Lilly of the Rangers explained, that wasn't planned. It's just how their draft boards fell. So many of their picks, once you get past the second round, and let's say, there are 2 picks in the third round, once you get past that, right, it's a crapshoot. And you're looking for intangibles, you're looking for skill set, you're projecting this player to fill out and get bigger. And there are things that you kind of dream on, if you will, for those young players. And the Rangers have done a pretty good job in the lower echelons of the draft in recent years, plucking out and generating some pretty good prospects. You can argue they've had more trouble at the top end of the draft, than at the lower end in recent years. So I'm not discounting the guys that they got. And, I look right here, I'm looking at my list, and the one guy who I heard the most about, from people that know a lot more about the draft, especially Europeans, than I do. A lot of people really mention Mikkel Eriksson, 4th round pick, center from Norway, as a guy to keep an eye on. Again, Rangers aren't the deepest down the middle, organizationally. Maybe Eriksson's a guy that can, fill in down the road, fill in and become a player for them, at that position, especially because, it would be around the time that Zibanejad and Trocheck and Miller are starting to, age considerably in their mid-30s with the Rangers. By the time Eriksson, would be a legit prospect for them. So anyway, a lot of people brought up Eriksson to me. I saw a lot of praise, more so online than anywhere else, for Evan Passmore, who was a late round pick by the Rangers. Big defenseman, played in the Ontario Hockey League. Many believe that he was a guy that was going to go, maybe a couple rounds earlier than he did. So another guy to keep an eye on. But 5 defensemen, 3 forwards, 1 center among the 3 forwards is where the Rangers went. And if nothing else, 8 picks. They used them all. They didn't trade any of them away, restocking their prospect pool. Remember, they had only 9 draft picks, 9 total in the previous 2 years. So this really is an influx of young talent and prospects into the organization. So it's been a busy time for the New York Rangers, to say the least. I think there's a lot they can feel good about here. To kind of put a bow on it. I thought there was enough talent on this roster anyway, plus with Mike Sullivan coming in, the Rangers are definitely a playoff contender, right? I felt that anyway. Now, we'll, massage things. You got to go over, well, what did Washington do? What did Carolina do? What did the Islanders do in comparison to the Rangers? How did the roster stack up? But there's nothing today that doesn't make me believe that the Rangers aren't a playoff contender. The one thing I will say, and I know some of the fans weren't happy with me on social media when I put this out there, I'm not sure they're a Stanley Cup contender. Okay. Sure, things can sometimes break your way, but I really look ahead to next year's trade deadline, and I really look ahead to next year's off season. Cap really rises. Artemi Panarin's contract will come off the books. Really curious to see what the Rangers do next year. To me, this was almost always going to be a bridge year for the New York Rangers. Let's, create some space. Let's change, the vibe a little bit with this team, the mojo with them, the makeup of the roster. But and certainly try and build a playoff team, but always with an eye to 2026. Let's see what Chris Drury's got to say. He's going to meet with the media, I'm sure, this week. So when we regroup next week, we can go over what he said. And we'll bring in a guest as well. So it's not just my opinion, but we'll play off each other, and we'll talk more about the Rangers. And we'll see between now and then if there's anything else that the Rangers come up with. So again, thanks for tuning in to the Rink Rap podcast right here at Forever Blue Shirts. Make sure to check out our stories over at foreverblueshirts.com. Like and subscribe to the podcast, and follow me on X at Jim Cerny, or us on X at Forever Blue Shirts. Thanks for tuning in. Have yourself a great and safe 4th of July weekend for those of you celebrating in the States. Cheers. We'll catch you next week.